customers that have been here, the working, the some 80,000 hospitality and other employees of Horry County and the 7th Congressional District and South Carolinians pay the blunt so that CEOs can live in luxury houses, have the gas they want and the luxuries, living off of paychecks, but your customers suffer. I speak, I come as one, but I stand here today speaking as the hundreds of thousands of the voiceless that weren't able to be here today, that weren't able to get online, who's afraid to get online, to speak their truth, that they're struggling, that this rate increase will certainly be a further blow to their pockets while your CEOs and all enjoy life so lavishly. Should the customers know they shouldn't bear the brunt of this rate? And I ask this commission, again, I come as one, but I stand as hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians asking you to oppose this rate increase. We're here to serve the people. When we think about our elected and appointed positions and staff, when we think about all humanity, what is best for them? And in this case, a rate increase is not best for them, not now or not any time in the future. I think to be more fiscally responsible, this company needs to go back and do some serious rethinking of the salaries they issue out and the monies that they may waste instead of getting off the backs of hard-working people that are already struggling, who are looking for livable wages, not only here in Horry County, but across South Carolina. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity, and I beg you to vote no for this rate increase. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Blaine Spain. Hold just a moment. Let me see if there are any questions. Mr. Gissendanner.
Chair Belzer, the company doesn't have any questions to Mr. Blaine Spain. However, we would object to his testimony and ask that it be stricken from the record. Understood Mr. Blaine Spain to indicate that he was not a customer of the company, either electric or, well, he specifically said he was not a gas customer. He also indicated that he lives in Conway, and he spoke about Horry County. This is an electric case, and we do not provide electric service in that area. So since he is not either
Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Tuesday, I'm not even sure the date, November 29th, thank you, at a couple of minutes after 10:05, and we are here for the hearing in docket number 2022-259E, which is the application of Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated for mid-period adjustment to increase base rates for the recovery of electric fuel cost. Let me first take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. Appearing virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston, and I note that Commissioner Justin Williams is on sick leave today. First let me recognize Ms. Clausen, Staff Counsel, to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Good morning. We would like to thank everyone for being here. This proceeding before the Public Service Commission in docket number 2022-259-E concerns the application of Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated for a mid-period adjustment to increase base rates for the recovery of electric fuel costs for electric service provided to customers in its assigned service territory in the state of South Carolina. Madam Chair, the docket is in order.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. We'll now take appearances of the party. Who's here for the applicant?
Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the commission. My name is Chad Burgess, and with me today is Matthew Gissendanner. He and I are in-house corporate counsel for Dominion Energy South Carolina. We also have with us today Michael Anselmo, Sarah Nielsen, and Jason Richardson, who are the company's outside counsel from the McGuire Woods Law Firm. It's a pleasure to appear before you today, and we look forward to presenting the company's case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess, and welcome to you and your co-counsel. Who's appearing for CMC Steel?
Alex Shishis.
Good morning, Mr. Shishis, and thank you for being here. South Carolina Energy Users Committee. You're not on. There you go.
Madam Chair, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm here for the energy users.
Good morning, Mr. Elliott. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Appearance from the City of Orangeburg.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. This is Henry Little, from Spiegel and McDermott, appearing pro hac vice on behalf of the City of Orangeburg, South Carolina.
Good morning, Mr. Little, and thank you. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good morning, Chair Belzer and Commissioners. I'm Kate Mixon on behalf of SACE and CCL, and with me today is my co-counsel, Emma Clancy.
Thank you, Ms. Mixon. Welcome to you and Ms. Clancy. And the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the Commission. My name is Chris Huber, and I'm here as counsel for the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I am joined by my co-counsel, Nicole Givens, and also our Executive Director, Nanette Edwards, is here today as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Huber, and welcome to you, Ms. Gibbons. There's a preliminary matter that I'd like to put on the record before we begin. Yesterday, we had the public hearings where we heard from customers of Dominion, and it was brought to our attention by one of the commissioners that this commissioner knew one or two of the witnesses. I believe that staff counsel has brought that to the party's attention, and just want to confirm that there's no issue. These are not, my understanding, well, I'm not going to couch how I understand the relationship, but is that correct? I just asked the parties to let us know.
Chair Belzer, this is Chad Burgess on behalf of Dominion Energy South Carolina, and thank you, Commissioner Williams, for advising of that relationship with those two customers who did participate yesterday. The company has no objection to Commissioner Williams remaining on the commission and hearing this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Any other party have any objection? Hearing none, thank you. I'm sorry, was somebody online?
Sorry, Madam Chair, no objection from ORS either.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. I can't tell if I'm hearing somebody or it takes me a minute to locate you in the hearing room, but thank you. Any preliminary matters?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Huber, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, it was indicated at the end of yesterday's afternoon session that all the parties to this proceeding had entered into it was described as a settlement agreement yesterday, but it's the document is titled a stipulation. And I have copies of that stipulation. I'm glad to share those with the commissioners if anybody needs a copy. I did want to just go over briefly an overview of the stipulation, if that would please the commission.
That's fine, Mr. Huber. Please proceed.
As I stated, all parties have entered into the stipulation. It constitutes a comprehensive resolution of Dominion Energy South Carolina's application for a mid-period adjustment to increase base rates for the recovery of electric fuel costs. The parties to this proceeding represent various diverse interests. As I stated before, all parties have entered into the stipulation. Under the stipulation, parties stipulate into the record the testimony of all witnesses who pre-file testimony and waive cross-examination of those witnesses. The witnesses will still take the stand to present their testimony and answer commissioner questions. The stipulation accepts all adjustments and recommendations proposed by ORS, including that the base fuel factor as proposed by the company will be adjusted to reduce the company's forecast of fuel costs by $4,820,304 to remove the requested increase in nuclear fuel costs. The company agrees to set the base fuel component at 3.806 cents per kilowatt, effective January 2023, as detailed in the rebuttal testimony of ORS witness Philip Hyatt. This is a significant decrease from the base fuel component of 4.877 cents per kilowatt that was proposed by the company. If approved by the commission, the rates proposed in the stipulation would increase the monthly bill of a Rate 8 residential customer using 1,000 kilowatts per month from $132.79 to approximately $140.53, which is a net increase of approximately $7.74 or 5.8%. excluding gross receipts tax and regulatory fees. For commercial and industrial customers, the proposed rates under the stipulation would increase the average monthly bills by approximately 7.0% and 11.1% respectively. For comparison purposes, the base fuel component of 4.877 cents per kilowatt proposed by the company would increase the typical monthly bill for a residential customer using 1,000 kilowatts from $132.79 to approximately $151.24, which would be a net increase of $18.45 or 13.9%, excluding gross receipts, tax, and regulatory fees. For commercial and industrial customers, the rates proposed by the company would increase the average monthly bills by approximately 16.8% and 26.6% respectively. Using the 3.806 cents per kilowatt, the under-collected fuel balance is expected to be approximately $404 million by April 2023, which was the company's goal or target in this direct testimony and application. The parties agree that DESC shall evaluate the feasibility, costs, and benefits to customers associated with reinstating a natural gas financial hedging program for fuel costs for electric generation, the results of which shall be made available to the Commission, ORS, and other interested parties as part of the company's 2024 annual fuel proceeding and docket 2024-2-E. DESC agrees to the actions recommended in ORS witness Michael Seaman Wynn's testimony related to providing certain updates regarding the Mountain Valley Pipeline project. The company also agrees to provide a report to stakeholders regarding benchmarking of the Plexos integrated energy model to the DESC system. The company agrees to provide this report no later than February 28th, 2023. The parties agree that all parties retain all rights to perform a comprehensive examination and assessment of the generating fleet performance, cost of fuel transportation, and fuel costs related to purchase power for the review period in the 2023 fuel proceeding and docket number 2023-2-E. Moreover, the parties agree that all parties retain the right to examine any issues addressed in this docket and recommend an appropriate true-up to occur in the 2023 proceeding. All parties recommend the stipulation be accepted and approved in its entirety as a fair and reasonable resolution of this proceeding. ORAS appreciates the efforts of the company in initiating the settlement discussions that resulted in this stipulation and the cooperation of all parties over the Thanksgiving holiday to finalize the stipulation to be able to file it yesterday. With that, I would like the other parties to have an opportunity to add anything that they would like or that I may have missed, and also if there are any questions from the commissioners. And I would like to make the stipulation an exhibit.
Any objection to making the stipulation a hearing exhibit? Hearing none, the stipulation will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 2 and received into the evidence of this case.
Madam Chair,
Vice Chair Powers.
may I ask Mr. Huber a question?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Huber.
Good morning.
When you said the average bill would go up, I think one of them was $774 as far as the average consumer, and then there would be, of course, the administrative cost, et cetera. Does the administrative cost, or is there some sort of tax thing, or does this increase in the bill increase any of those attached costs?
I don't have the exact number for the administrative gross receipts tax or regulatory fees. Typically, when we calculate those impacts, we do not include those. I don't have the exact numbers on what those are.
Will one of the witnesses be able to discuss any of that?
Yes, but Mr.
Thank you
Vice
very
Chair.
much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Powers. Any exceptions or comments related to the summary provided by Mr. Huber? Mr. Anselmo.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. And Vice Chair Powers, Mr. Rooks will be able to answer your question. That number inclusive of gross receipt tax and regulatory fees would be at $7.78. But Mr. Rooks will be able to answer that question.
You know, sometimes when I order something, then they start talking about shipping and handling, and I'm paying twice what I thought I was.
That's a fair point.
Thank you.
And then, Chair Belzer and members of the commission, there's also a portion of the stipulation that recognizes the company's forecasts that were utilized in this matter. They utilize market data current at the time of the filing of the application, and the company's direct testimony that the company's sales projections are reasonable and align with historical sales data, and that the company's forecasted costs are reasonable, and the company's dispatch forecast is reasonable as well. So you'll find that agreement in the stipulation from all the parties as well.
Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. I actually have a question about that paragraph, so who will I need to direct that to?
That'd be Mr. Rooks as well.
Thank you. Any other party have any comments or exceptions to the summary of the stipulation? Ms. Mixon.
Yes, thank you, Chair Belzer. Just some very brief comments. So SACE and CCL are also very happy to sign onto the stipulation, which, as others have noted, ensures that customers will see the benefit of the lower than expected, although still high, fuel costs over the last few months and the updated forecasts. We think that the stipulation serves the public interest by helping to phase in these costs and mitigate potentially much more significant rate hike that customers may otherwise see in May of 2023. That being said, SACE and CCL, stand by our witness, Ron Binn's analysis. That additional low-cost solar on Dominion system could have saved customers a substantial amount of money, and that a mechanism where Dominion shares some of the risk associated with fuel costs would be more fair to customers. And under the stipulation, we reserve the right to reintroduce that analysis in Dominion's comprehensive fuel proceeding in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mixon. Any other party with comments? Mr. Elliott.
Just to say this, Madam Chair, the stipulation is really sort of fashioned around the ORS surrebuttal testimony, where they delved into the forecasts, fuel forecasts at a time sort of concurrent with their testimony, and I thought that will lead to an excellent result in this mid-period. These mid-period reviews are very, very rare. I think the ORS is to be commended for taking that step, and I know I speak for my clients that we appreciate the ORS's surrebuttal testimony and their efforts in this matter. Also, the company has been very, very forthcoming and collegial and easy to deal with on this. I think everybody understands these costs have gone haywire.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Any further comments or questions from the commission at this point? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Huber. Are there any other preliminary matters before we take witnesses? Mr. Burgess.
Chair Belzer, just two quick things. A little bit of housekeeping from yesterday. Mr. Gissendaner had a discussion with you about if the company had heard anything during the public witness portion of the testimony that would require us to make a filing with this commission. We did not hear anything that would require us to make such a filing. So there's no need to address any deadlines of things that we discussed on that. So I wanted that to be clear. And then secondly, I wanted this commission to know that we have, Dominion Energy South Carolina, we have a department who handles customer service. And within that department, there are special people. And I say special people because they're the ones who reach out to customers on a daily basis when we learn of customers who have need. And we had those people standing by yesterday. They listened to the customers' comments that were delivered. Rather than waiting for those customers who expressed genuine need for assistance, we called them. We talked to them last night. Those who needed help, we were able to provide assistance in either the form of directing them where to go or leading them by the hand and helping them get the assistance they needed. So I wanted the commission to be aware of those things that we do behind the scenes to help customers. We do recognize that this is a difficult time. There are a lot of pressures going on inside the world that are beyond all of our control, but we do have empathy, and we empathize with those customers who are going through hard times, and we are here to help. So we just wanted to make sure that y'all understood that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Appreciate that information. If there are no other preliminary matters, I'll recognize Dominion to present their witnesses.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. The company will call the panel of Alan W. Rooks, Rose M. Jackson, and Michael D. Shin to the stand.
What? Yeah. Before you're seated, I'm going to ask you to each raise your right hand. I'm going to ask you to state your name individually, please. Do you each solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you. Mr. Rooks, could you please state your full name for the record?
Alan W. Rooks.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services as Manager of Regulation for Dominion Energy South Carolina.
Thank you.
Are you able to pull that microphone a little bit closer, please?
How's that?
Thank you.
And I realize we're at an awkward angle, so please don't feel compelled to look at me. It'd be helpful for the court reporter to speak in the microphone.
I should have said this. If you're more comfortable at that other lectern where they're not looking over their shoulder at you, please feel free to use that.
Thank you. All right, thank you. And books are caused to be prepared under your direction 9 pages of direct testimony pre-filed with the commission on August 9th, 2022.
Yes, I did.
If I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Belzer, I move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Rooks be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Rook's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
Yes, it did. It included exhibits AWR1, AWR2, AWR3, and AWR4.
Chair Belzer, I move that AWR1, AWR2, AWR3, and AWR4 attached to Mr. Rooks' direct testimony be entered into the record as, I believe, the second hearing exhibit.
Third.
Third.
Mr. Rook's exhibits AWR 1 through AWR 4 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 3 and received into evidence of this case.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, did you also cause to be prepared or prepare under your direction 16 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed with the commission on November 9th, 2022?
Yes.
And if I ask you all the questions contained in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Belzer, I move the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Mr. Rooks be entered into the record as given orally from the stand.
Mr. Rooks' pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, did your pre-filed rebuttal testimony include any exhibits?
Yes, it did. It included rebuttal exhibit number AWR 1, rebuttal exhibit number AWR 2, and rebuttal exhibit number AWR 2A.
Chair Belzer, I move that the rebuttal exhibits AWR 1, rebuttal exhibit AWR 2, and rebuttal exhibit AWR 2A be entered into the record as the fourth hearing exhibit.
Mr. Rooks' exhibits AWR 1, AWR 2, AWR 2A will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 4 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you. And Mr. Rooks, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct and your pre-filed rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Could you please present it to the commission?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the commission. Since its last annual proceeding in docket number 2022-2E, the company has experienced an unprecedented increase in its base fuel undercollected balance resulting from unforeseen and significant market shifts and commodity price increases. If the company had not filed this application and its current base fuel component remained at the commission-approved 3.032 cents per kilowatt hour, the company's forecasted base fuel undercollected balance was projected to rise to approximately $592 million by April 30th, 2023. To partially offset these unprecedented market events, the company recommended adjusting its base fuel component from 3.032 cents per kilowatt hour to 4.877 cents per kilowatt hour. This recommendation was based on the forecast available at the time the company filed its application and direct testimonies, and was designed to suspend the company's forecasted base fuel undercollected balance at approximately $404 million. The company's application was designed to pause but not recover the company's actual base fuel undercollected balance until the parties could reevaluate the company's fuel costs at its next annual fuel proceeding. The commodities markets have continued to fluctuate since the company filed its application and direct testimony. As a result, my rebuttal testimony updated my pre-filed exhibits to 1, reflect actual fuel costs and operating experience through October 31st, 2022, 2, realign nuclear fuel costs with the November 2022 to April 2023 forecast presented in the spring fuel hearing proceeding per ORS recommendation. 3, include the current natural gas, coal, and oil pricing for the same period. And 4, implement the base fuel component changes in the month of January 2023. These changes are reflected in rebuttal exhibits AWR 1, AWR 2, and AWR 2A. My rebuttal testimony also responded to the recommendations made by CCL and SACE witness Benz and South Carolina Energy Users Committee witness O'Donnell. Since the filing of my rebuttal testimony, all the parties to this proceeding have executed a stipulation. The stipulation provides that the company will adjust its base fuel factor with the nuclear fuel adjustment recommended by ORS witness Seaman Wynn to reduce the company's forecasted fuel costs by $4,820,304 and to set its base fuel cost component to ORS's proposed adjustment of 3.806 cents per kilowatt hour, beginning with the first billing cycle of January 2023 and extending through the last billing cycle of April 2023. If approved by the Commission, the fuel factors proposed in the stipulation would increase the average monthly bill of a Rate 8 residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month from $132.79 to approximately $140.53, which is an increase of approximately $7.74 or 5.8%, excluding gross receipts tax and regulatory fees. This adjustment agreed to in the stipulation does not recover the company's actual undercollected base fuel cost balance in this proceeding. Rather, the settlement adjustment would suspend increases to the company's undercollected base fuel balance and lead to an expected undercollection of approximately $404 million at the end of April 2023. The stipulation also recognizes that the company's forecast utilized market data current at the time of filing the application and the company's direct testimony, that the company's sales projections are reasonable and aligned with historical sales data, and that the company's forecasted costs are reasonable and the company's dispatch forecast is reasonable. The company further agreed to evaluate the feasibility, costs, and benefits to electric customers of a natural gas financial hedging program for natural gas purchases associated with electric generation, and will provide the results of the evaluation as part of its 2024 annual review of base rates for fuel costs proceeding. The company will also provide an update on the current status of the Mountain Valley Pipeline project to the Commission in docket number 2022-5-G, and in this docket no later than March 31st, 2023. Finally, the company will provide the parties to this stipulation with results of its Plexos benchmarking study by February 28, 2023. The company requests that the Commission approve the stipulation in its entirety as presented by the settling parties. The company believes the settlement presents a reasonable resolution to this mid-period filing and is in the best interest of its customers. Thank you, and this concludes my summary.
Microphone, Mr. Anselmo.
Now it's on. Ms. Jackson, could you please state your name for the record?
Rose M. Jackson.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services Incorporated as the Director of Fuel Commodities.
Thank you. And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 9 pages of direct testimony pre-filed on August 9th, 2022?
Yes, sir.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
No, sir.
And if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir, they would.
Chair Belzer, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Jackson be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Jackson's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Ms. Jackson, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 8 pages of rebuttal testimony pre-filed on 2022?
Yes, sir.
And did you have any exhibits attached to that rebuttal testimony?
No, sir.
And if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir.
Chair Belzer, I move the pre-filed rebuttal testimony of Ms. Jackson be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Jackson's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct and rebuttal testimony?
Yes, sir.
Could you present it to the Commission, please?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. I'm appearing before you today to explain the natural gas price forecast at the time the company filed price projections in its last fuel proceeding in docket number 2022-2-E and discuss the market shifts and commodity price increases related to natural gas since that fuel proceeding. Natural gas markets continue to experience increased demand, lower than historical average storage inventory levels, geopolitical matters, and constraints with interstate pipeline capacity during the spring and summer months. These market shifts led to commodity price increases and impacted the actual and forecasted natural gas prices, which necessitated the company's mid-period filing. Natural gas price forecasts have continued to fluctuate since the filing of this application. In my rebuttal testimony, the company agreed to provide and ORS with an update on the Mountain Valley Pipeline Project no later than March 31st, 2023. The company also agreed to evaluate the feasibility, cost, and benefits associated with a natural gas financial hedging program for fuel cost associated with electric generation. The company will make the results of its analysis available to the Commission, ORS, and other interested parties as part of the company's 2024 annual fuel proceeding and docket number 2024-2-E. This concludes the summary of my pre-filed testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Shin, could you please state your name for the record?
Michael Shin.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm currently employed by Dominion Energy Services Incorporated as manager of fuel origination.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 10 pages of direct testimony pre-filed on August 9th?
Yes, I did.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
No, it did not.
If I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, I move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Shin be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Shin will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you. And Mr. Shin, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct?
I have.
Could you please present it to the commission?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the commission. Excuse me. The purpose of my testimony is to describe the change in market prices for coal and number 2 fuel oil and the resulting change to the forecasted delivered prices since the last fuel proceeding. During the 2022 fuel proceeding hearing, the company presented testimony regarding an increasingly volatile coal market and upward price pressures facing the market in future months. Since January, the forecast for coal prices per delivered ton have increased. My pre-filed direct testimony outlines the increases in the projected cost of delivered coal for 2023 and 2024 as of July 5th, 2022. It also outlines the projected domestic coal market price increases with international coal markets experiencing the same trend of price movements. The company has also experienced volatility in its cost and forecasted price of number 2 fuel oil. As I explained in detail in my pre-filed testimony, there are many factors impacting market conditions, and those factors are outside of the company's control. In conclusion, the market has experienced unforeseen production and supply conditions in 2022. These conditions have impacted the market prices for coal and number 2 fuel oil, along with the forecasted delivered prices since the company's fuel proceeding concluded in 2022. Thank you for your time. This completes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. Chair Belzer, Mr. Rooks, Ms. Jackson, and Mr. Shin are available for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Anselmo. It's my understanding from the stipulation that the parties are not engaging in cross-examination unless questions from the commissioners prompt any redirect.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, I'm not going to call on individual parties for any questioning. Commissioners, questions for this panel?
Madam Chair,
Vice Chair Powers.
thank you. And thank y'all for being here today and for the work you're doing to try and get this thing worked out. Mr. Rooks, if I could start with you. When I hear the term $400 and something million in under collection, that's a scary number. That's a lot of money.
It certainly is, Commissioner.
And we don't know the future. I mean, even this morning, they're talking of a train strike that could even further affect a lot of things we're trying to do. The hope would be that this would be offset by better fuel prices, which would result in some sort of decrement in the future. Would it not?
Yeah, I think certainly that is the hope. We are certainly mindful that $404 million will have to be addressed in the spring fuel proceeding coming up. So that issue is not being addressed here, and that will certainly cause probably additional price pressure. And I think last night, if I look at it correctly, we will be filing fuel testimony with this commission in our 2023 proceeding in 78 days. So it's February the 15th. So I just want to level set with the commission that $404 million balance is going to have to be addressed in that proceeding, and it's certainly going to apply pressure to the rate But to get back to your question, we're hopeful that the commodity increases that we've seen will abate. But certainly that's not something that I or anyone else is able to forecast sitting before you here today. But that would be a tremendous help here, certainly.
Okay. Well, if things don't get better, are we not in some way just kind of kicking the can down the road?
Well, I think, this is a fair proposal right now for customers. I think probably as you step back and take a look at this, we're probably heading towards some higher factor. I don't know what that is or what that will be, but this is a measured step in that direction. It's not, I guess, placing the whole burden entirely on customers at one time. We certainly listened to the public hearing yesterday, and as you heard Mr. Burgess say, we're very empathetic with our customers who are struggling to pay their bills. We have programs out there, and we would encourage customers to participate in them. I have the number and a website here that customers can call, but it's, I want to just make sure I give it to you correctly, but it's 1-800-922-8822 or 8802, excuse me. Let me repeat that, 1-800-922-8802, or they can go to our website, Dominion Energy, www.dominionenergy.com/customer assistance. And in checking with that department yesterday, I'm told that there's $100 million in funding that's still available through various customer assistance programs that we have. And so I would encourage our customers who are struggling or having a hard time paying their bills to reach out to us. And Monday through Friday, we'll have somebody there to answer that line and provide assistance. But I'm sorry, I kind of went on there a little bit.
That's fine. That's fine.
That answers your question.
Well, and, just thinking about it overnight, it was a lot of the stories we heard yesterday were very touching. And, I wish I could be a secret Santa for all those people in some form. But the increase that Mr. Huber talked about for the average customer was based on 100 how much in a bill?
It would be based on a 1,000 kilowatt hour bill, and excluding gross receipts tax, that number was $7.74. Okay. And with the gross receipts, the total impact that customers will see, or a residential customer would see, will be $7.78. Okay.
Well, and the another thing that struck me yesterday is I've never had an electric bill over $200, I think, but a lot of the people who are the most vulnerable, they talked about $200, $300, $400 bills. So the people who are dealing with that, they're going to get more than a $7 increase. They're going to get probably 2-3 times that increase.
Yeah, certainly for customers who use more than that, the increase would be, in dollar terms, would be higher.
Do you feel that Dominion's doing everything they can do as far as looking forward as to a lot of people talked about alternative renewable energy and different things. Do you think Dominion's making a step in that direction as they should?
Yes, I absolutely do. And I heard some of our customers speak to the solar on our system. And I just wanted to point out that the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, who is a party here to this proceeding, publishes an annual report. And in July of this year, that report revealed that Dominion Energy South Carolina, among southeastern utilities, has the second most solar watts per customer on our system of all the southeastern-based utilities. And as I looked at that map, I believe that was 7 states: North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. So we have a tremendous amount of solar on our system, and more is being added daily, is what I would say. So we have a significant amount of solar on our system.
Well, and I'm also aware that it takes time to make changes, particularly something as big as that. In the meantime, I like turn on the light switch and the lights come on.
Absolutely. Reliability is very important as well.
Another concern I had after our thinking last night is that a lot of the people, and I thought of my mother because when we would watch TV, they would talk about a news story and they'd say, you go to www.whatever.com and you can get the rest of the story. And of course, she was 90. She didn't have internet, didn't want it. I worry about, or would hope there's some way that Dominion could make people more informed. I mean, you can't count on the poorest of the poor to hop online every time something pops up or to get the information. Do you know, or do you, and you may say this is somebody else's department, a better way to address making information available about energy efficiency, about things that can be done, about these programs, the $100 million? How do we get that to the people who need it?
Well, I am aware that the company has worked with the AARP and had a town hall meeting back in July. And as I understand it, there were a number of participants who participated directly. And I think that's in collaboration with the other utilities in the state. Duke Energy as well participated in that. And it was very successful. And I think the AARP has broadcast that out to its members in the state. I think 175,000 strong, if I read that correctly in reviewing my notes. So we're participating. We're doing that. I would also say that it's tough with customers who don't have access to internet, but we do have a website out there that addresses this mid-period proceeding and answers a number of questions that customers may have about why we're here, about the things that are driving why we're here. So that is another example of outreach on the part of our company to customers. And I would also say that I believe from an energy efficiency perspective, we send out bill insert notices. So for those customers who receive their bill by paper, if they open that up, they will see noticing indicating that demand side management and energy efficiency programs are available to them to just reach out to the company and call. And, we can certainly come out and do a home energy audit or checkup. I may not have the name exactly right, but those are some examples of things that we're doing proactively to try to get out there and understanding it's difficult to get to everyone, but we certainly want to give you the assurance that we're trying.
Well, and I'm afraid too with the bill insert, when I open my bills, first thing I look at is the number. May not get to the bill insert, and I would hope customers would. Is there any outreach in like churches that you think that Dominion could do or through these other agencies? I think that may be a good source to reach people.
I think, and again, I'm not the expert on it certainly, but our customer assistance teams have a number of in-person events around the service territory where we work with local community action agencies, and in some cases it may be churches as well, but we have a number of events like that in local communities where we reach out and try to get customers to come and participate and provide them knowledge about assistance programs that might be available to them, energy efficiency programs that might be available to them, and that sort of thing. So we do have outreach programs that we participate in actively.
Are there any commercials or TV that reaches out and says, we've got money available? Because that's what they're watching is TV.
Sure. Now, I'm not sure on that, but certainly we're here listening, and we can take that back. But yeah, I know that I've seen the inserts and reminders in the bill about where to set the thermostats during winter to try and help mitigate electric bill costs and that sort of thing. But I'm just not sure able to speak to what's been on advertising for that. But certainly we're here and we're listening, and we'll take that back.
Well, thank you. Ms. Jackson, I just had a couple of questions. And we may have talked it to death in an earlier hearing, but with the hedging program, we of course will be anxious to hear. Is there any progress in that, or could you tell us just a little bit about how Dominion's going to approach that?
Yes, sir. We'll be doing two different analyses. The first one that we talked about in the previous proceeding will be related to the local distribution side of the house or the gas department, and how that potential hedging program would impact our residential, commercial, and industrial customers on that side of the house. And then we'll perform a separate study for financial hedging with regard to fuel purchases for electric generation. We have had a hedging program, a financial hedging program previously for the local distribution side or the gas department, but we have not had one for the electric department.
Okay. The other thing you mentioned that is of concern, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Is there any progress being made with that, or do you know?
The latest update that we've received from Mountain Valley Pipeline, and I just wanted to clarify that we are not an owner in the project, we are a customer in the project. So we received the publicly available information they're still stating the second half of 2023. However, they are still working to try to resolve the issues before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals.
So as far as it going to court, you'd be looking later of next year. If there's mediation or settlement, then something could happen sooner.
Yes, sir. I would think by the first part of 2023, we should know more.
Let's just say that you get a message January that says this is settled. We're gonna move forward. What sort of difference will that pipeline make in cost and fuel? Certainly make it more available, but how would it benefit customers?
Yes, sir. This pipeline is going to bring approximately 2 BCF of gas into our region of the country. And it's not just the fact that it's a new source of natural gas, but it's a new source of shale gas, which has traded lower than what we have seen. And when you look at what has happened in the Carolinas, we're in Transco Zone 5's delivery area, we don't have any supply in that zone. So that's why we've been faced with greater volatility than you might see in the Northeast. At one point in time over the summer, we were actually trading higher than New York City. And that's very unusual. Yeah. But it's due to the lack of infrastructure to bring that gas into our region.
Well, if it's very cold, a cold winter, the Northeast is going to be even more competitive as far as gas, which could also affect the price in a bad way.
Yes, sir, that is the potential. We have seen that weather events, we had that cold snap the week before Thanksgiving, and we did see prices go up. I think right now we are just in a very delicate balance between supply and demand, and the fact that we have had delays in pipeline capacity over the last 8 years. We're now seeing the consequences associated with that.
Okay. And that's where I think there's some idea that a successful hedging program would be a benefit if things, had that kind of competition could be avoided to some degree.
I just want to set expectations, though, as I stated in the previous proceeding. Just keep in mind that any financial hedging program will have a cost.
Sure.
So we just have to balance, and that's what we'll be researching and comparing. What are the benefits? What are the costs? And how should we set up a hedging program? Can we balance those?
Thank you. All right. Mr. Shin, Merry Christmas. You're off the hook.
Thank you, Vice Chair Powers. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. And first off, I'd just like to express my appreciation to the company for being proactive yesterday and reaching out to customers that we heard from. I think that's a wonderful step, and I do appreciate that. Additionally, I would like to just say thanks to all the customers that called in and appeared in person. I think it's important for us to hear from them as the commission, and I think it's important also for the company to hear, and ORS. It's just, it's an important part of this process, and I appreciate those customers participating. And I would just like to thank you all for working together to try to reach an agreement as well. And I have a question now. So basically, I guess my concern is with nuclear fuel and what's going on with that. So much of the world's supply comes from Russia, and we've seen what sort of an impact the activities in Russia has had on natural gas. And my concern is that in the not too distant future, then that might have an impact on nuclear fuel. And you all may or may not be the appropriate people for me to ask this question, but you're the ones that are here, so I'm going to toss it out there. Is anything going on to with nuclear fuel? Are you in a pretty good supply situation? Do you anticipate, I guess, just trying to be forward thinking with regards to nuclear fuel? What's going on from the supply side and basically at the company? Can you give me any information on that?
Commissioner Thomas, I can say it's been a while since I've been involved in the nuclear procurement, as Mr. Shin has been also, but I will say this, that based on our historical purchases of uranium to supply the VCS plant, it wasn't necessarily supplied from Russia. Our largest supplier or source of uranium supply in this region came from Canada. So I'm not sure, we haven't been involved in that over the last few years, but I do think that is, Canadian uranium supply is one of the largest in the world. And we're very fortunate to be geographically located near that supply. So I would think that our supply sources would be more directly assigned to Canada rather than Russia. And in the past, we've also bought supply from Australia as well.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that information and just hope that the company overall is paying a lot of attention to that on a go-forward basis. And thank you. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Other commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Carol Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. I'll just echo my thanks as well to all involved in terms of the customers calling in, as well as you all working over the Thanksgiving holiday. One of the things I haven't heard anybody talk about is the prediction for weather over this coming winter. And I know you're not forecasters, but I know you read them. And how does that interplay with the estimates that you've come up with, as well as the impact to customers?
Commissioner Williams, I will have to say that I've said this many times, that a meteorologist can be wrong 100% of the time and keep their jobs. So depending on which forecast you look at, you see everything from warmer than normal to colder than normal temperatures. The Farmer's Almanac has said that we're going to have cooler than normal temperatures and possibly more precipitation. So over the years, I think they have been pretty good at projecting the average weather of the winter season. But what we base our projections on is normal weather. That's the average weather that we can expect. So we will see changes in prices, as Commissioner Thomas mentioned, related to weather. And I think because of this delicate balance that we have right now, you could see a spike in prices that we haven't seen over the previous few years. But it's outside of our control. That when you look at the events that have occurred worldwide, it has really put pressure on natural gas worldwide, and that's why you're seeing prices fluctuate. But I will say, as I've stated before, that it's great to have diversity of supply, and we need to have all types of supply. However, until battery technology advances and we can have incremental storage for our renewable sources of energy, natural gas is going to play an important part in bridging until we get to that battery technology. So we have to focus on reliability as well. And so we are required to make sure that we can serve our customers on the coldest day of the year. And the best forecast that we have is based on average weather and average customer usage.
So we get back to hope in terms of the impact come next year filing in February and what we'll be discussing next year.
And traditionally,
In reality.
Yes, ma'am. And traditionally, our coldest weather occurs between January and mid-February.
The other question I have has to do with stockpiling and purchasing and just adding a little bit more to the record on how that impacts your cost and when you make, this is more of a general, just wanting to understand, how you determine what fuels you're going to purchase and when you determine to use certain types of fuels based on their cost.
Well, unlike the local distribution side of the house or the gas department, which only has natural gas as its sole fuel
Right.
source, on the electric generation side of the house, we have the ability to compare the cost of fuel on a daily basis. So we have an economic resource commitment group that works to obtain current market prices for each fuel source, and then they dispatch based on the lowest cost of fuel for that day. So when we talk about hedging, the physical hedge that we have on the electric generation side of the house is that we do get to compare different fuels that we can use, not only on a daily basis, but on future periods as well. So we have the availability to lock into a physical purchase for a certain portion of our fuel if we see that one fuel is going to be lower than the others.
How has that changed as the amount of solar has increased? And so and maybe the answer is on a sunny day, this is how it's changed, and on a not sunny day, this is how it's changed.
I'm not sure I can't answer that one.
Yeah, so solar, the solar that we have on our system, primarily, I'm speaking right now about the utility scale solar. It's a must-take resource, right? If the sun is shining and it's putting out power, if it's not going to cause any type of a system emergency, as far as overloading a particular circuit or anything like that, that power flows to us. And certainly there's been a lot of discussion in avoided cost proceedings and other proceedings about the intermittency of that. But as far as from a fuel cost perspective, we have load following, what we call or refer to as load following resources. So as clouds might move over these facilities and load drops and then climbs back, certainly our customer's load is not that volatile. And so you have to have these load following, or I guess intermittent type resources to kind of fill in those peaks and valleys, if you will. From a fuel cost perspective,
Right.
that's probably, maybe we have to have more spinning reserves, which is generation that's readily available to meet that drop.
Right.
But I think, that's kind of hard to quantify if you're looking at the entire system, right? Because we're balancing load and we're balancing generation at the same time. It's just that now with solar, we have a resource that's much more volatile. And so that kind of adds a layer of complexity for our planning team on a daily basis in our operations team.
And I was going to add, I think that's why natural gas is going to play an important part, because our natural gas facilities are able to ramp up and ramp down as needed. And I think until battery storage technology advances, that's when we're going to have the ability to store energy from our renewables when that technology becomes more available in the system. But until then, we're going to have some type of fuel source that matches the demand when it's needed. So when the sun's not shining or we have limited wind available, there has to be a resource that can respond.
Thank you. Appreciate your answers. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners, any questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. And good morning, Mr. Rooks, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Shin.
Morning.
I apologize for not sitting in there with you, but I'm a little under the weather, but I'm just across the hall. Mr. Rooks, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Commissioner Powers asked about Dominion's renewables and reliability. Along these lines, is Dominion adding solar capacity just to add it? Or are you adding it where it makes sense for reliability and economically beneficial for the customers and Dominion?
I think to respond to that question, Commissioner Caston, the larger utility scale farms that we have that are either under construction or in development are all paid out at the avoided costs approved by this commission. And so the avoided costs by nature are designed to make the customer indifferent as to whether they would or kind of hold the customers harmless in that they would pay no more than the marginal cost of that power that would be generated by the utility on the system. What I'll say is right now, the solar capacity that's being added is primarily being added through our new Solar Choice metering tariff, and that would be rooftop solar that residential customers are choosing to put on their roofs. So when I spoke about renewable capacity being added, I spoke mainly from that perspective. I think that we have maybe one other farm or two other farms that are currently in development that will be coming online. But those farms are being paid by DESC and its customers at the avoided cost approved by this commission and no more.
Thank you. Also, earlier, Ms. Jackson mentioned the benefit of having diversity of supply, including gas. Do you believe it is practical to eliminate all fossil fuels and rely solely on renewables?
Commissioner Caston, as I said earlier, until battery technology makes tremendous advancements, I think we're going to need fuel diversity. And I think that natural gas is going to play a part in the bridge to that battery technology because, as Mr. Rook stated earlier, the current solar energy that we have that we're taking on our system, if it doesn't respond due to weather conditions, if we have a cloudy day move into our system that wasn't projected, we have to be able to meet the firm demand on our system. And natural gas plays a big role in that because it can respond very quickly in the event that another resource cannot provide energy at that time.
Do you share that view, Mr. Rooks?
Yes, I certainly do. I think to Ms. Jackson's point that, certainly diversity of supply options is of tremendous benefit. To me, I think where I guess, and this is just me speaking personally, if we take an option or a certain fuel source and completely rule it out or completely take it off the table, then that certainly, we still have to meet that load, and that supply has to come from somewhere. And so, to the extent that we lose a fuel source or see a fuel source decline, that gives us less chance to mitigate volatility, if you will. So certainly for the foreseeable future, I think these fossil or thermal resources, however we refer to them, are going to still be a part of our system, and they're going to need to be in the foreseeable future. But that's certainly something. I'm not the resource planner for Dominion Energy South Carolina, but I know that's something that they evaluate on a near daily basis, is the economics of all the future sources of power that are available to us. And you see that in the IRP filings that we bring before this commission.
Okay, thank you. And I think Ms. Jackson, I can't remember, may have been in a previous Dominion gas hearing. I think it was. But you were asked, I guess, about the Mountain Valley Pipeline or just getting pipelines in general, what the issue was. And if I recall, you said, is it mostly lawsuits or what is preventing these from getting done?
Yes, sir. It's litigation associated with permits.
And what is the issue?
There are several different issues, but there have been special interest groups that have questioned the need for the pipeline capacity and also questioned the impact of those pipelines on the environment. So each pipeline project has had its own specific issues. For instance, with Mountain Valley Pipeline, there are 2 species of fish that are being evaluated, the impact to them. I think it's the candy darter and the Roanoke, I can't remember the term, perch maybe, that are they're having to do additional environmental studies on. But I will say that Mountain Valley Pipeline has been in development for nearly 8 years. And the concern that I have from a reliability standpoint is that if we can't have additional or incremental pipeline infrastructure in this country, I am concerned not only about what the price of natural gas will be in the future, but also what the level of demand that we can meet in the future without incremental natural gas. Because we're very fortunate in this state to continue to have load growth. And I'm just concerned about how do we handle that on a reliable basis. As I've stated previously, I think natural gas is going to be the key to bridging between where we are today and where we want to be as far as diversity of supply that includes renewables in the future. But we have to focus on reliability.
And you're saying part of that is the additional pipelines to move the gas from point A to point B.
Yes, sir. The supply is here in our country, but we have to be able to move it from that region in the Pennsylvania, West Virginia area down to the Carolinas in order for us to meet the demand growth.
I understand. Thank you. Finally, Commissioner Powers, I think, asked you about Dominion evaluating the hedging. And you mentioned, and I think it was in your direct testimony, that the company has never used hedging for electric generation. Why is that? Any particular reason?
As I've stated previously, for the electric side of the house, we've used what I consider physical hedging because we have the ability to compare the cost of other fuels. On the LDC side or the gas side of the house, we don't have that option. Gas is the only fuel that we can use. So we had financial hedging for the gas department. However, on the electric side of the house, we did not. And in the past, natural gas was seen as an intermediate fuel for electric generation. It was not seen as a baseload fuel. And once we moved into more of a baseload use of natural gas, that's when we entered into that 7 or 8 years of very stable and low gas prices due to the shale gas revolution, where we were able to bring in very stable, low-cost supplies from that new development of shale production.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And when you said that, it seems like I remember you saying that previously in a previous hearing. So you're consistent.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. I have no more questions, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Mr. Shen, you're off the hook too.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioners, further questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Irvin?
thank you. Let me echo the comments of my fellow commissioners and thank Dominion for reaching out to the customers that we heard from yesterday. That's very commendable, and we appreciate the proactive steps to try to help those folks. And that brings me to a point that Commissioner Powers raised earlier, which is bill inserts probably are not the most effective way to reach people. I know that's the first thing that goes in my trash can when I pull my bill out. And I just feel like, if there's $100 million available to help customers, the television advertising is certainly one way to do it, particularly in the winter months when bills are rising. And I would encourage you to strongly consider that kind of outreach in addition to all the other methods that you're using continue to use bill inserts, but television and maybe even radio advertising and some internet advertising could reach more customers, because we know that there's so many more customers that need help. Even though 90,000 people have already been helped in South Carolina with the federal funds that came, there's still another $50 million available to 39 counties that are still taking applications. And of course, that will expire on December 16. And because it helps everyone. When somebody can pay their delinquent utility bill, it helps Dominion too, hold down costs, because those are new revenues. So I would ask you to redouble your efforts to try to reach the unserved and underserved who may not have access to the internet, but I think probably every home has a television, and they're more likely, I think, to learn more about these programs if you put your toll-free number on the screen and emphasize that these monies are available. I think we could see great results. The other thing, I do want to thank all the parties for working through the stipulation. I know it did take a lot of work on your part, but based on what I've heard so far, it seems to be a fair and just outcome for all concerned. These are difficult times for our residents in South Carolina. Everyone's under so much financial stress. We've got to really think outside the box. And that brings me to my next line of questioning. Ms. Jackson, I want to talk with you just a minute about the ORS, Office of Regulatory Staff recommendation that Dominion consider the feasibility for gas hedging for your electric customers. As you know, the cost of natural gas is double since the beginning of the year. And while we've seen some relief in the cost of the most recent cost, it's nowhere near as affordable as it was in the past. So are you all considering looking at what other utilities do and looking at best practices on how best to set up a hedging program so that customers have a bit of an insurance plan in the event that natural gas prices continue to rise?
Yes, sir. That's we have planned to look at what other utilities, especially the utilities within the Dominion Energy fleet, are currently doing associated with hedging, and also look around us to see what other type of hedging programs there are. We're in the early planning stages associated with the two different studies, one for the gas department and one for the electric generation side, because it is very different, as I stated previously.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And, there may be some financial incentive too. I think that I'm willing to bet there's some plan out there where if you're able to demonstrate that you save customers substantial sums of money on their bills, there should be a financial incentive for Dominion and other utilities when they utilize hedging programs and they result in good outcomes. So I would encourage Office of Regulatory Staff and your working group of stakeholders to kick that idea around, because to the extent that we can incentivize reducing fuel cost, that would help all customers, not only residential, but commercial and industrial. And so please consider that as you go forward and study the feasibility of what might be available.
Commissioner Irvin, if I can just remind the commission that a financial hedging program will be designed to reduce volatility associated with natural gas prices, but it will not be designed to beat the market. And I think that's the misunderstanding that a lot of folks have, is that somehow we can design a financial hedging program that's going to be a slam dunk, if you will. So somehow I'm going to be able to forecast a lower natural gas price that will bring tremendous gains to offset if fuel prices, if natural gas prices go up. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and I've never been able to beat the market.
Well, it's difficult. It's kind of like predicting the weather, as you talked about earlier. So there's a bit of luck involved. Timing, of course, is involved because nobody knows what might happen. And I think it comes down to risk reward. But we have seen just in the last couple of years how dramatic and unexpected gas prices, which under our law, as you know, under the laws in our state, they get passed through to customers on a dollar for dollar basis. So we have to be creative and proactive in trying to find any ways that could mitigate or reduce those costs. And while it's not a perfect solution, it's part of I think it's a piece of the puzzle that we need to evaluate and examine carefully. And I would encourage you to do that. The other thing, and I realize that Dominion Energy is a potential customer or subscriber of the Dominion, of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. But I'm going to mention this again. I mentioned to you earlier. The litigation that you referenced, I believe, is still pending in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia. And they have a mediation program. And it just seems to me that and I know that Dominion is not a party, but you can pass this information along to the parties that are involved in that litigation. There should be a common ground among the environmental interest and the utility interest and the customer interest to see that this project is completed. As I recall, I believe you told us it was about 95% complete already. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So it really only makes sense to, why waste all that money that's already been expended and never utilize that resource that would lower cost in the Carolinas for all customers. We need that gas for reliability. It is a bridge fuel. It's certainly cleaner than coal, and it's available. And I just believe there's got to be some common ground there. And, environmental interests are important too. We want to make sure that we protect our environment and reduce CO2 and methane emissions. But I'm sure that if we could get the parties around a table with a qualified mediator, that some of these issues could be worked through. It's going to be a slow slog in Congress because it didn't seem to get anything gets done up there despite the best efforts that have been made. But that's one possibility that might work. And the other possibility that, I think that the proponents of the Mountain Valley Pipeline have not pointed out to the general public is the cost savings involved. If we can get gas delivered to the Carolinas at a cheaper price, that helps everyone. And that's a message that needs to go out. I don't think most people realize that. And to hold up a project that's already 95% complete really doesn't help anyone. I'm hopeful that the parties can find common ground and make that happen so that we can have not only low cost but reliable energy sources that would help everyone in our state. I want to commend your attorneys too for working with customers. That's going to be important going forward because so many people are going to feel the effects of these fuel costs as they get incorporated in bills. And please do everything you can to do customer outreach and redouble your efforts in that regard. Appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Thomas?
thank you. So that there's been a lot of discussion here today about the $100 million that's available to help customers, and it sounds to me like the company's doing a lot to try to get that word out. And, we've heard again here today, television being perhaps an effective way to get that message out. And seems to me that TV is here today. I see some people in the back of the room that I don't normally see, and cameras, and I saw them putting microphones out earlier. So I think that the TV stations are hearing this. I hope that the TV stations will take some action. That'd be a tremendous public service. We can't do anything to make that happen, but I hope they're listening, and I hope they'll do that. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Shin, we've been giving you Christmas presents this morning, and it's way too early to do that. On page 9 of your testimony, not that you need to go there, you talk about number 2 fuel being purchased and based on daily prices. Again, I'm just trying to understand kind of that part of your work a little better. That's my only purpose. But are you able to hedge on the purchase and getting surplus fuel in anticipation of the market changing with the number 2 fuel?
Man, most of what we do with number 2 fuel oil, it's either used as a startup fuel or a backup fuel. So we keep inventory on hand at all times. But we usually try to keep those tanks full, just because when you need it, you don't necessarily are able to forecast it. So we keep that inventory there. And a lot of our facilities, especially the larger combined cycles, can consume that fuel faster than you can get it resupplied. So that's why we do that. So if a polar vortex, for example, or something like that come through and you can't get the gas. So most of that is just like it's mentioned in there. It's a daily purchase. It's whenever that fuel is loaded into the truck is the price we happen to pay for that day.
So that sounds like not a lot of hedging can happen based on a lower price if you're using it faster than you can get it resupplied.
It's that and it's unpredictable. There's no predictable nature other than, for instance, a watery station happens to be in an outage and you know they're going to come back online. That's the fuel that they use in order to do that. And you have a pretty good idea of when they might come online, but there's no way to purchase that fuel ahead of time because usually those kind of instances are take or pay.
It also sounds like you're saying it's not a significant impact.
No, it's not.
You're agreeing. I understood that correct, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can contradict that.
No, that's correct. It's certainly a big expense, but in the grand scheme of the fuel that we use, it's not a lot.
And I have one other question, and this has to do with Mr. Benz's testimony, and wanted to get your perspective. It might be this might be a question to Mr. Rooks, but certainly happy to hear from anybody. In terms of his analysis and the hypothetical scenario that he produced, did it appear that what was used was the your IRP, your most recent IRP analysis in terms of the mix?
I certainly can't speak, Commissioner, to Mr. Benz's analysis in great detail. I will say that it's hypothetical. That if we had more solar, I could make a hypothetical and say that if we had more hydro, run-of-river hydro is zero cost as long as gravity holds and water runs downhill, and we're able to take it through a turbine, that's zero cost power. So I'd just like to point out that over time, the company's resource mix that we have today in service of our customers has been brought before this commission in numerous siting hearings, rate cases through time. And these assets are today used and useful for our customers, and they're providing reliability for our customers. And, I think Commissioner Powers was talking about it earlier, or I heard him say it yesterday, that energy mix doesn't change overnight.
Right.
And that's certainly true. And our generation mix that we have today has gone through prudency reviews and reasonableness proceedings through time. And this commission has found that at the time that those resources were placed into service, they were beneficial for our customers. And so I think maybe that was the company's issue with that is that it was backward looking, and that it attempted to come up with a hindsight view of things and a what if type scenario, but that's not the world that we operate in. So
That sounds like you're saying no, that the hypothetical was not based on Dominion's IRP, approved IRP.
Well, I think to say that it was based on the IRP, I think that would probably be the case, because he wouldn't have used any different set of resources than we have available to us. He probably would have modeled our system based on the resources, but he would have said or made the assumption over time that the company should have done more solar. But
I understand.
We have the solar on our system has been placed there by developers who constructed those assets, and they have made that work through the avoided costs that the company had approved by this commission at the time, and they've placed those assets into service for customers. So it's hard to go back and say, what if we had done this, or what if we had done that, and subject the company to any kind of punishment or penalty for that, because we've participated in proceedings through the years, IRP proceedings, siting hearings, and rate cases where we've brought all of that through to this commission for review and for findings of prudency.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Mr. Rooks, I know you are expecting me after my comment with your attorney, but do you have a copy of the stipulation with you?
I do.
I'm on page 5, and I'm looking at paragraph B4.
Okay.
And that states the parties agree that for purposes of this stipulation, the company's forecast utilized market data at the time of filing the application and the company's direct testimony. The company's sales projection are reasonable and aligned with historical sales data. The company's forecasted costs are reasonable, and the company's dispatch forecast is reasonable. I know I read through ORS's witnesses' testimonies, and I realized that they did analysis and I say testing, but that's not the right word, of the sales projections and the dispatch forecast. But ORS had a recommendation with regard to the forecasted cost. And I'm just curious how we can say in the stipulation, are we talking about at the time of the application and the direct testimony, or what's in the stipulation as far as the forecasted cost? Because there was a change, was there not, from the time of the filing of the application and ORS's testimony?
Let me explain it how I understand it.
All right, sir.
Chair Belzer. At the time the company filed its application back in early August, we referenced specifically gas, coal, and oil commodity impacts that were having adverse consequences for fuel costs and were causing increased fuel costs for us. I think in ORS's view at the time, and certainly you can confirm with them, I don't want to speak for them, but their feeling was we did not reference nuclear as being a contributor to the fuel cost increases that we were seeing at the time. And so their feeling is that the company, when it did that forecast and provided it in August, we updated our nuclear fuel costs as well. And so since we did not reference that in the filing, I think it was the ORS's position that those costs should not be incurred here and should be removed. And so all we did in that forecast was reset the nuclear fuel costs back to what they were in the spring fuel proceeding for those forecast months. So that's my understanding of what happened there, and the company agreed with that.
Okay. So that phrase in B4, in your opinion, or it's your testimony, that is relates more to the nuclear fuel cost than the forecasted cost of gas, coal.
Yeah, I think I would read that. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, I believe that's correct.
Well, what drew my attention to the paragraph is that there are 3 areas that basically approve the company's methodologies, I should say, because I think it's more than just forecast. It's the sales projections and the dispatch. And so the way I understood ORS's testimony, and I can ask them, but ORS agreed that based on their testing that the company's sales projections were reasonable and aligned with historical sales data. I think they took a 5-year average and compared that to January to June or something, and the variances were very close. So they found that to be reasonable. And then the ORS tested the dispatch forecast, found that to be reasonable. But then when it came to the forecasted cost, even in the rebuttal, they ORS recommended a change from what the company. Well, I think they requested the company to run updated forecast based on the change in the prices. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
we did that and provided that with my rebuttal testimony.
right. But at that point, the company didn't want to change the ask on the fuel factor. Is that correct?
At that time, that's correct.
And then ORS filed rebuttal and pointed out, hey, we need to be looking at this is my verbiage, we need to be looking and using the updated forecast for this mid-year adjustment. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, we used
Okay.
it, and yes,
And that's what ended up being in the settlement agreement. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay. I'm just curious, when it says forecasted costs are reasonable, is that talking about the methodology or the result?
I think when we're talking costs, we're talking about the gas prices that have been front and center here. We're talking about the coal pricing and the oil pricing moving forward in those projections. So it's not necessarily what's happened actually. It's did we use reasonable forecast assumptions for the cost of those fuels at the time that we reran the forecast prior to that rebuttal testimony.
Okay. And what threw me, and this is really the other part that what threw me, is in the first part of the sentence where it says the company's forecast utilized market data current at the time of filing the application. Well, then things changed after that. And so that's what I couldn't wrap my head around to say that the forecasted costs were reasonable. Is that contingent on the first part of the paragraph where it says at the time of the application or later? That's where
I think that is referring to the most current forecast that we have available to us, which was presented in my rebuttal and then as well in the ORS SIR rebuttal. So I think we're referring to that particular forecast. And Commissioner Bessel, I'd like to just say as well that these are obviously forecasted costs. So this is our as we sit, or as we arrive at a point in time, this is our best estimate of what these costs will be going forward. But I want to point out that the customers will not pay any more than the actual cost incurred.
I understand. I understand the fuel statute. And just as Ms. Jackson said that meteorologists can be wrong 100% of the time and still have a job. The only thing I know about forecast is they're going to be wrong one way or another. So
We had a,
you're never going to hit it on the head, the nail on the head there.
we had
The
a
minute we
person,
input, they're going to change.
So
Because there have been times where we enjoyed days where we saw very little fluctuation in the natural gas market, but that's not the time period that we're in now. So as soon as my group sends over the current NYMEX prices for a certain period of time, now within 5 minutes, you can get an update, or a minute.
okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Shin, you're off the hook with me. And that's it, Mr. Rooks. Thank you.
thank you.
Company, any redirect? Okay. Do you ask, you want these witnesses excused?
At our risk, I understand, we would make the request.
All right. You may stand down.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've been going about an hour and 40 minutes. Why don't we take about a 15-minute break, please? And who's next? Is your witness testifying, Mr. Elliott?
He is, but we have an agreement among the parties that he would be here at 1 and
Okay, so we'll go out. Okay, we'll take somebody else. Ms. Mixon, is your witness live or virtual? Or Ms. Clancy?
He's virtual. We will confirm with him that he's available to testify, but I believe that's the case.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. If not, we'll keep going down the line. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission. We are continuing with the hearing in docket 2022-259E, which is the application of Dominion Energy South Carolina for a mid-period adjustment in base rates for recovery of electric fuel cost. Mr. Anselmo or Mr. Burgess, does that complete? Thank you. I need to first take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Urban and Commissioner Caston, and present in the hearing room, we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carol Lee Williams, and Chair Belser. Mr. Anselmo, does that complete Dominion's case?
It does. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. SACE CCL.
Yes, thank you, Chair Belzer. The South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy call Ronald J. Binns to the stand.
Mr. Binns is virtual.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Binns. Would you state your name for me, please?
Sure. My name is Ronald J. Binns.
And Mr. Binns, I'd ask that you raise your right hand. Let me swear you in. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Binns, please state your name for the record.
It's Ronald J. Binns, B-I-N-Z.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by my own consulting firm. It's called Public Policy Consulting.
Mr. Binns, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on October 28th, 2022, direct testimony consisting of 44 pages?
I did.
And do you have any additional changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
No, I do not.
Mr. Binns, if the questions put to you in your direct testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, I would move to have Mr. Binns' pre-filed corrected direct testimony entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Binns' pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Mr. Binns, did you also attach to your direct testimony 5 exhibits identified as exhibits RJB1 through RJB5?
I did.
And were the exhibits to your direct testimony prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes, they were.
Chair Belzer, I would also move to have exhibits RJB1 through RJB5 as attached to Mr. Binns' pre-filed direct testimony entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Binns' pre-filed direct exhibits RJB1 through 5 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 5 and received into the evidence of this case.
Mr. Binns, did you also cause to be pre-filed in this docket on November 21st, 2022, surrebuttal testimony consisting of 7 pages?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any additional changes or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony at this time?
No.
If the questions put to you in your surrebuttal testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
They would be the same.
Chair Belzer, I would move to have Mr. Binns' pre-filed surrebuttal testimony entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Binns' pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Now, Chair Belzer, if it's acceptable to the Commission, Mr. Binns will now present a summary of his pre-filed direct and surrebuttal testimony, as well as briefly address CCL's and SACE's support of the stipulation.
That's fine. Please proceed.
Great. Mr. Binns, please present your summary to the Commission.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Belser and members of the Commission. I guess it's just afternoon, yes. My name is Ron Binns. I'm principal with Public Policy Consulting. That's a firm that offers regulatory consulting services in energy policy and regulatory matters. Throughout my 40-year career, I've gained extensive experience in the field, including serving as the chairman of the Colorado Public Utilities Commission from 2007 to 2011. After reviewing DSC's mid-period application and relevant South Carolina law, my pre-filed direct testimony offered 2 recommendations to the Commission. First, I recommended that the Commission disallow between $21 million and $31 million of DSC's initially requested fuel cost increase in this proceeding. This disallowance reflects the millions of dollars in unnecessary fuel costs that DESC incurred due to the company's inaction in procuring demonstrably low-cost solar generation. This missing solar, approximately 500 megawatts, could have offset coal and gas generation with fuel costs that were almost twice as expensive as the solar. Importantly, these savings could have been achieved without any reductions or changes to the capacity provided by DESC's existing fleet and would not have any negative impact on system reliability. My second recommendation was that the Commission adopt on a going forward basis a risk sharing mechanism whereby any annual fluctuations in fuel costs would be split 10% by the utility and 90% by customers. This mechanism, similar to what has been adopted in a handful of states, exposes the utility, not simply its ratepayers, to the risks associated with purchasing fuel with volatile costs and in turn motivates the utility to make less risky decisions. In contrast, the current mechanism unfairly shifts all of the risk of fuel cost onto captive customers in a manner that does not, quote, tend to assure public confidence and minimize abrupt changes in charges to customers, quoting from the Commission's authorizing statute. In rebuttal, I responded briefly to DESC witness Rooks' mischaracterization of my dispatch analysis, and I reiterated my initial recommendation for a disallowance and changes to DESC's fuel cost adjustment mechanism. Since my testimony was filed, all parties, including CCL and SACE, entered into a stipulation that was filed with the Commission yesterday. The stipulation adopts ORS's recommended adjustment to the company's interim request, reducing the initially proposed $18.55 per month increase to average customers to $7.87 per month. This adjustment reflects updated fuel costs and forecasts and the fact that DESC's incurred fuel costs did not increase as much as initially projected. CCL and SACE support the stipulation's incorporation of updated and thus more accurate data and forecasts, which will reduce the rate shock in this proceeding and in the company's anticipated 2023 fuel proceeding. Importantly, though, while the stipulation reduces the immediate impact on customers' bills, fuel costs and volatility are still driving substantial bill increases at a time when, as the Commission heard yesterday, many South Carolinians are struggling due to inflation and higher costs for all manner of necessities. Ultimately, the Commission will need to address the root cause of these increases, fossil fuel resources that are risky and volatile, and the company's fuel cost mechanisms that shift risks away from the company and onto its customers. Under the stipulations, SACE and CCL reserve the right to raise again these arguments in the company's 2023 annual fuel proceeding. At this time, however, SACE CCL believes the stipulation is a reasonable resolution of the company's interim request and asks that it be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Binns. Chair Belzer, the witness is now available for questions from the Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Commissioners, questions for the witness? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Bentz, good to have you here. I'm impressed with your clock keeping because you were like right on 12 o'clock when you said good afternoon to us.
Well, I would have been there, and had the case not settled, I probably would have traveled there in person. But I hope my electronic appearance is okay with everybody.
Absolutely, but it'll be good to see you in person at some point. I have two questions. One you can anticipate is coming, so I'll ask the other one that is new. Your risk sharing concept is interesting, and I wanted you to expound on it from the perspective of others who might use it, and where it is used. Is it something in the statute, or is it a policy that the commissions in other states might have introduced?
The last part of your question's the harder part. I think that as a general matter, it's been the commission's decisions and not a statute that required the sharing. I'm most familiar, most recently, with Hawaii, which set up a 98%, 2% sharing of risk of fuel cost changes. I was involved in that case. But I also know that there are probably 10 other states, 8 or 10 other states, who use sharing mechanisms that range from, I think 98.2 is the lowest, but they range upwards to 90, 10, and I think there was one that was 85-15. I'm not positive that's still in place, but it's generally speaking been the commissions which made that decision. I'd like to just add, if I could, before we go further on this, this sharing is not intended to penalize the company in the sense that over the long run, the ups and downs will pretty much even out. And so, as I showed over the last 10-year history with DESC, the 90-10 sharing would not have added up to much, I think a total of $12 million at the end of those 10 years. So it nearly zeroed out.
Thank you. And the question that you're probably anticipating is your hypothetical scenario. How did you set that up? Was it related to Dominion's approved IRP, one of those scenarios?
Well, several. Let me get to the first part, which is the nitty-gritty. I took the testimony and exhibits in this case, which projected the fuel costs, utilization, prices out through April 2023. Embedded in that was a projected dispatch. I would say it's hypothetical, but all that means is that it was projected. And I modified that by adding 50% more solar than that dispatched projected. Now, as I understand, the solar capacity at DESC is about 1,000 megawatts. I think it's 1,046 megawatts. So my modeling added 500 megawatts, essentially. And then I ran the scenario to see how the system would operate with that additional solar. I made decisions based on a very common utility industry practice of backing off the most costly, fuel costly elements in their generation stack to accommodate the additional energy that was being put in by the solar. So everything I used was somewhere in what they filed. And you may use the word hypothetical, but my question is, what would have happened if they'd added 500 megawatts of solar generation at a time when they knew that would be cost effective? And in their updated 2021 IRP, the company actually stated that modeling indicates that if the solar and battery prices assumed for the three RP8 scenarios can be achieved, adding 500 megawatts of near-term combined solar and battery storage assets in addition to the 1,046 megawatts of solar already installed could be cost-effective for customers. They said could be. I'm convinced from what I know of this industry and what the prices of solar in the Southeast are, that would have been cost effective. And essentially my analysis shows that. You ask whether I based it on their approved IRP. Well, it kind of depends on what you think the approved IRP means. The company's been very clear that the IRP is not the place where resources are selected. It's a snapshot of the company's plans for the commission, subject to eventually filling in the resources. I was chairman of a commission in Colorado where the IRP was a little different than that. The utility and the commission discovered which resources would be built, and then that was expected to happen. They could be amended, but that was the approved IRP. So again, I don't know what status you accord to the IRP, but the company does not seem to want to be bound by resource decisions in the IRP. And so I don't know why they didn't add more solar when they could have, when they knew it was cost effective, but they didn't. And that's essentially the thrust of my testimony, that it would have saved a lot of money if $35 a megawatt hour solar power were being pumped into the system instead of burning coal or natural gas at cost per megawatt hour of almost twice that much.
Mr. Benz, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners, questions for the witness?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Urban.
Mr. Benz, you said had the company added 500 megawatts of solar, a whole lot of money could have been saved. Can you tell us how much? Can you quantify that amount based on your calculations, modeling?
For the period of July 1st of this year to April 30th of 2023, which is that future period, April 1st or April 30th, I don't remember. But anyway, about $20 million $20 million at 500 megawatts. I also modeled 750 megawatts, in other words, a 75% increase. If I may, Commissioner Irvin, I want to emphasize that this does not change how their system operates. It simply brings in an energy source, much like run-of-the-river hydro, that may be variable, but on average, you know when it's going to be there, and you can accommodate that, leaving everything else in place. So it's just a cheaper energy cost, or energy source. You don't need capacity value from solar in this situation. Solar doesn't have a very high capacity value. There's debate about exactly what that should be nominated at, but this just takes the energy. And the all-in cost of solar in South Carolina, I estimate in that future period will be about $35 a megawatt hour. That may or may not be what your avoided cost is, but nothing prevents the company from going out and into the market and asking for solar. You don't have to pay PURPA prices. You can. And again, I frankly don't know what the PURPA price is right now in South Carolina, or the avoided cost rate is. But the company could have gone out and bought solar. And I think 500 megawatts is a reasonable assumption. It's 50% more than they've got right now. And as I understand it, all of that 1,000 megawatts is essentially avoided cost PURPA contracts. I think you heard one of the DSC witnesses say that people were proposing projects and they were paying avoided cost rates to those projects. That's fine. We did it differently in Colorado. We used competitive bidding and we got much better prices than what the avoided cost rate was at that time. So I realize it's hypothetical. I realize there's that objection, but my response is that they could have done this. They knew back in 2020 and 2021 what the cost of solar was. Had they wanted a couple projects of 250 megawatts or 5 100 megawatt projects, whatever they wanted, I'm convinced they could have had it. They could have had it consistent with their capacity on the transmission system, and it would have allowed their existing units to run without interference. You would back them off, but the backing off was within the capacity of all of those plants. And you can ramp up and down the other plants also within the ramping ability of all those other plants. So that's what I provided.
Is it your opinion that then it would not have affected reliability had they added 500 megawatts of solar?
Not at all. Not at all. Again, I took care that the redispatch that I did stayed within the parameters of what these plants can do, the coal and natural gas plants and the pump storage facility. All of those were their ramping capability, their load factor, all of that was taken into effect. I might just mention, nobody asked me for the details of that report. I was kind of surprised that the company seemed not to care how my analysis was done, but I'll just say a couple things. The VC Summer plant was not reduced in generation at all. You don't swing generation at nuclear plants. And in reverse order of cost of generation, I, in the model, backed down the generation at the steam coal plants and the natural gas steam plant and the the combined cycle plants. And then that savings in fuel at those plants was a number we can calculate, and the cost of the solar at those times. Again, I was using their estimate of what the solar production is going to be at 1,000 megawatt capacity, and just added 500 more megawatts to that.
Thank you, sir. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any further questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Caston?
thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Benz.
Hello, Commissioner Caston.
Earlier in the hearing, did you hear the questions and responses of witnesses relative to new gas supply lines, distribution or transmission lines? Did you hear any of those conversations?
Yes, I did.
Do you agree that if new gas transmission lines were in place, gas prices in South Carolina would most likely be less?
On peak days, yes. I don't know that on the days where you're not constrained, I doubt if there's much difference in the price. As you know, market price is exemplified by the Henry Hub price. And most of the time, South Carolina or DSC is buying gas at about those prices. Now, for a month, probably in February and maybe other times, you'll see pinches in availability and the price goes up. But so I don't know. The answer to your question is generally yes, but I don't know how much. And there's probably no way to predict that. You can imagine relieving those high prices on the, say handful, but probably 20 days a year where you have substantial constraints and therefore higher prices. The theory that it's going to bring in cheaper gas from Pennsylvania, I don't know where that argument is posited. Pennsylvania has no impetus to sell prices below market, so I don't think they will. You will have more supply, that's true. Possibly, I'm going with the arguments of the proponents. You will have more supply. And again, as I said, if it's not constrained, I don't know why gas from Pennsylvania would cost any less than gas bought on a different pipe.
Well, as I recall, in multiple hearings, we've heard that there's a good supply of gas. There's a tremendous supply of gas. The problem is getting that gas to where it's needed, primarily through lack of transmission lines. Does that sound right?
Yes. I mean, DESC has never not had enough gas, as far as I know. It's always there. The question is, what's the price? And I don't think the addition of the pipeline is going to cause a ripple at all in the national price, or the regional, I should say, the regional price of natural gas at Henry Hub. And then the Transco prices they pivot off of that with potentially a basis differential. So given that they've never not been able to get gas, you just have to pay for it. The pipeline might alleviate some of that congestion and therefore on those days produce gas at lower price than you would have otherwise. I'm saying this to use the term hypothetical. I'm using this as a hypothetical analysis. I have not done the work on that. I don't want to suggest that I have, but just as a matter of energy economics, I think you might save some, but much of the gas pricing that we see in this case would not have been affected at all by additional pipeline capacity, as far as I can tell. I'm happy to be shown that I'm wrong, but that's my thinking on that.
I understand, and Mr. Benz, I'm no economist either, and I certainly don't know what would happen, but I've heard throughout the course of my life that supply and demand does matter, and it seems to. But I guess the truth of the facts is we know now what it is, but we don't know what it would be if additional transmission lines were in place. So I guess that is a hypothetical.
I agree with that. Yes.
In your direct testimony, I noted, while you were chair of the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, you helped implement, I think it said, Colorado's vision for, I guess, a new energy future, 30% renewable energy portfolio standard, which, caught my eye. Where did that 30% come from?
Political negotiation in the Colorado legislature. I won't pretty it up with anything more than that. There were people wanted more, people wanted less. But what's interesting is Xcel Energy has now passed 30%. The law with with respect to the largest utility in the state, is not really binding at the moment. Excel has been adding, I put in my testimony, the rather shocking, I think, numbers for Excel Energy of Colorado. The company has a system of 7,200 megawatts. They have 4,000 megawatts of wind capacity to supply and 1,000 megawatts of solar generation. So the two renewable energy sources add up to something like 70% of the peak. Now, they don't generate that much. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the Excel is really thrown all in because the cost of renewables, especially wind in the West, you don't have that resource in South Carolina, but you do have pretty good solar. And my review of the contracts that are being led in the Southeast, I think you could get a very, very good price if solar went out to bid in your region. So, I mean, to do what Excel has done with solar on your utility from DSC system, you'd have to have something like 3,500 megawatts of solar, something like that. And it's to be determined whether the system can be operated on that. And I don't think you have to go that far because I showed what 1,500 megawatts would achieve.
So if I heard you right, it sounds like it was mostly a political decision, not necessarily based on engineering or...
Well, the utility agreed to it, which means politically that they knew they could do it. I mean, that's a given. Like in your state, the utilities are pretty influential in the legislature, so 30% was seen at that time as a push. It wasn't, let's see, at that time, this would have been 2007 or 8, somewhere in there. That's when the 30% came in, maybe a little bit after that. But anyway, Excel Energy wasn't happy initially, but they then figured out that they could probably meet it. They got some accommodations. So yeah, it was but again, that's now in the rear view mirror. The economics of wind and solar in Colorado and storage, the economics of those are now dominating. And I think the company would be the first to tell you they think owning solar and owning wind is more profitable to them from owning traditional fossil resources. They haven't closed, well, they've closed some fossil resources, they probably would have anyway, but the system is as secure and reliable as any utility in the country. Excel has very high reliability numbers, so that has not affected them, and they would not let that happen. I've visited their control room, and if you haven't been to a control room lately, you might want to do that because it's a real interesting story of how these folks use forecasts of weather to help them plan out what the dispatch is going to be. In real time, you can see them responding to increases and decreases in various resources, including fossil, but also wind and solar. And so it's a more complicated, I think the word used by the panel earlier was complicated or complex. It does make it more complex, but that's not to say it can't be done. And as you know, engineers like nothing better than a problem that somebody says is going to be hard. So that's what's been happening.
Oh, you have us pegged, Mr. Benz. You may have said it and I missed it as far as the wind versus the solar. What percentage of that was the wind?
In Colorado,
Yes, sir.
let's see, I can do this real quick. It's about 80% wind and 20%, no, about 75%, 25%. That's about what they have going. 4,000 megawatts of, okay, I can do this real easy. It's 80-20. 80% wind, 20% solar. But the solar is recent and it's growing, and they're adding more solar now than they were when prices of solar were somewhat higher.
Okay, I couldn't recall, but I know the times I've been there, it seems like on the plains, especially up on the mountains, you get some pretty good winds.
Yeah, the winds in the mountains are actually too strong. You go up
100
on
mile
a
an
ridge.
hour.
Yeah, you go up on a ridge in the Rocky Mountains, you don't want to put a wind turbine because it won't last.
I
But out
can't
in
imagine.
eastern Colorado is where the wind resources are.
Probably wouldn't be well received putting wind turbines on top of the Rocky Mountains anyway.
That's a different issue, but you're right.
Finally, and I guess this is really just a basic question. Do you agree, though, that because in earlier discussions there's been talk about a diverse energy portfolio, you know, the wisdom to not putting all your eggs in one basket, whether that's gas, solar, wind, but a diverse portfolio. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
And decisions should be made based on safe, reliable sources that are that make good economic sense in the best interest of the customer and the utility, correct?
I wouldn't have it any other way.
Good enough. I appreciate it, Mr. Benz, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioners, any further questions for the witness? Hearing none, any redirect?
No redirect.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Do you wish to excuse your witness?
Yes, please.
Mr. Benz, thank you for your testimony, your appearance here today. You are excused.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Elliott, did I understand you to say your witness isn't available till 1 o'clock?
That's correct. But I think we'll be here right at 1.
Okay. ORS, do you have any objection to going ahead and proceeding with your witnesses? We're a bit out of order, but
No, Madam Chair.
parties, let me ask you this. Ordinarily, we would break for lunch. Do y'all want to break for lunch, or do y'all want to keep pushing on through? I think the commission's fine with just pushing on through if y'all are. Is there any objection?
We don't have any objection to push on.
Any
through.
objection from the parties? Okay.
We're fine with
Mr.
that,
Huber,
Madam
I'd
Chair.
ask you if you wouldn't mind calling your witnesses now. A little bit out of order, though.
Thank you, Madam Chair. ORS calls Michael Seaman Wynn.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn, before you're seated, would you state your name, please?
Michael Seaman Wynn.
And would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated.
And Madam Chair, just for planning purposes, Mr. Seaman Wynn is, of course, testifying in person. Our second witness, Mr. Hyatt, will be testifying virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Huber.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, will you please state your name for the record?
My name is Michael Seaman Wynn.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the Deputy Director of Energy Operations at the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 13 pages of direct testimony and 5 exhibits, which were pre-filed in this docket on October 28th, 2022?
Yes.
Did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 13 pages of corrected direct testimony, which was filed in this docket on November 14th, 2022?
Yes.
What were the corrections reflected in your corrected direct testimony?
On page 10, line 11, $149.74 was changed to $150.78. $16.95 was changed to $17.99, and 12.8% was changed to 13.5%.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed corrected direct testimony?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, ORS asks that the pre-filed corrected direct testimony of Michael Seaman Wynn be entered into the record of the case as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Huber, I want to ask for clarification if I could. You are just entering the corrected, you don't plan on entering the direct?
No, just the corrected. All the changes are reflected in the corrected, and we just wish to enter the corrected direct.
Is that agreeable with the parties? Because I think the stipulation said that both copies would be admitted.
I believe it just references the corrected direct.
You're correct, I apologize. Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn's corrected direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you also file 5 exhibits marked as Exhibit MSH1 through Exhibit MSH5 with your pre-filed corrected direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
What were the corrections reflected in the exhibits filed with your corrected direct testimony?
On Exhibit MSH-5, in the column labeled DESC Proposed Bill Incorporating ORS Recommended Adjustment, I corrected $149.74 to $150.78.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to the exhibits that were filed with your corrected direct testimony?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, ORS asks that the 5 exhibits marked as Exhibit MSH1 through Exhibit MSH5, which were filed with the corrected direct testimony of Michael Seaman Wynn, be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's exhibits attached to his corrected pre-filed testimony designated as MASH 1 through 4 and corrected MASH 5 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 6 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for clarification, the only corrections reflected in the corrected exhibits are on MSH5. The exhibit is just still labeled Exhibit MSH5.
I understand. I have it wrong in my notes. I apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 7 pages of cerebral testimony which were pre-filed in this docket on November 21st, 2022?
Yes.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed cerebral testimony?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, ORS asks that the pre-filed cerebral testimony of Michael Seaman Wynn be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you also file 2 exhibits marked as cerebral exhibit MSH1 and MSH2 with your pre-filed cerebral testimony?
Yes.
Is that the right number?
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to those exhibits?
No, no, I do not.
Madam Chair, ORS asks that the 2 exhibits marked as cerebral exhibit MSH1 and MSH2 filed with the cerebral testimony of Michael Seaman Wynn be be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Seaman wins exhibits Surrebuttal MSH 1 and 2 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 7 and received into the evidence of this case.
Mr. Seaman, did you prepare a summary of your direct and surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Will you please present that summary to the commission?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My testimony sets forth the ORS findings and recommendations resulting from its examination of Dominion Energy South Carolina's application for a mid-period adjustment to base rates for the recovery of fuel costs associated with its provision for electric service to retail customers in South Carolina. ORS reviewed the company's forecasted costs of fuel for coal, natural gas, number 2 fuel oil, fuel transportation, and purchase power for the period of November 2022 through April 2023. Based on ORS's review and examination, ORS concluded the company's forecast utilized market data current at the time of the filing of its testimony. The company's sales projections are reasonable and aligned with historical sales data. The company's forecasted costs are reasonable, and the company's system dispatch forecast is reasonable. ORS did have certain recommendations in its direct testimony, including reduction of $4,820,304 in unsupported nuclear fuel costs, the company providing an update to the forecast using current commodity prices, the company providing an evaluation on the feasibility, costs, and benefits to customers of instating a natural gas hedging program, and the company providing an update to ORS and the Commission no later than March 31st, 2023 on the Mountain Valley Pipeline Project. The company provided an update to its forecasts in the rebuttal testimony of company witness Rooks. Additionally, the company included actual operating experience for the period of July 2022 through October 2022. Utilizing this forecast and incorporating ORS's recommended adjustments, ORS recommends setting the company's base fuel component at 3.806 cents per kilowatt hour compared to the company's requested 4.877 cents per kilowatt hour. If approved by the Commission, the rates proposed, including ORS's recommended adjustments, would increase the typical monthly bill for a residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours from $132.79 to approximately $140.53, a net increase of $7.74 or 5.8%, excluding gross receipts tax and regulatory fees. For commercial and industrial customers, the proposed rates would increase the average monthly bills by approximately 7.0% and 11.1% respectively. Subsequent to the filing of my testimony, a stipulation was entered into between all of the parties in this proceeding. The parties agreed to accept all of ORS's recommendations and adjustments as described in ORS's direct and surrebuttal testimonies. ORS supports the approval and requests the Commission adopt the stipulation as presented. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. Madam Chair, Mr. Seaman is now available for questions from the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. Commissioners, questions of this witness? Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Thank you for being here this afternoon. I just would like to hear your thoughts on the Mountain Valley Pipeline and what you believe the potential impact is. I guess I heard one thing from Ms. Jackson and another thing from Mr. Benz, and just kind of trying to look for the middle ground here. Maybe you're not the right person to ask, but do you have any thoughts or comments on how that might impact gas costs to South Carolina customers?
I believe that Ms. Jackson's analysis is accurate. Of course, the proof will be in the pudding if the project is completed, but it should provide the opportunity for lower price gas from the Pennsylvania Shale region to be available to Dominion in South Carolina.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston?
Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman Home.
Good afternoon.
And it's already been asked before, but I'll ask you too, with the recommendation on the base fuel rate, do you have any concerns with a large undercollection in the next fuel case?
Commissioner, I believe that if pricing of commodities continues to be what is in the company's forecast and what ORS is seeing on a daily basis, there is a strong possibility of there being a substantial undercollection to be addressed in next year's annual fuel proceeding, yes.
Saying it is what it is.
I suppose that's one way to address it, yes, sir.
All righty. I think that's it. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Irvin?
thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn, how are you, sir?
Well, Commissioner, how about you? I hope you are as well.
Yes, sir. Wanted to ask you if you know what efforts are being made at the Office of Regulatory Staff to try and get the word out to ratepayers in South Carolina. There's still about $50 million of federal grant monies available for both utility bills and rent. Have you all tried to strategize a way to better get the word out to those 39 counties that still are taking applications through December the 16th to help those folks that are behind on their bills?
Commissioner, I spoke with our Consumer Services Division. These are the folks at ORS that address calls from consumers on a daily basis. They are a very diligent department who every day really do strive to meet the needs of the company's customers, all of the customers in South Carolina. ORS conducts outreach at some of the events throughout the state. I know of our consumer services folks going to various events throughout the state, setting up table or providing information to those that are interested in listening on LIHEAP, on the federal funds of which you spoke, Commissioner. I understand that there are still funds available, but I also understand that the $100 million of the ERAP has been fully allocated. When addressing customers on the phone who have concerns on their payments, the Consumer Service Division also works very closely to make bill payment arrangements with the companies to provide customers options in meeting their needs, as well as being able to pay for the services that are rendered to them.
Well, thank you. I know that you're doing all that you can, but I'm wondering if is it possible that we could get the 7 largest counties in the state who stopped taking applications to consider reopening that process, because there are a lot of people impacted, for example, in Charleston County, where Dominion serves, that are struggling with their bills. Have you looked into the possibility of extending the application deadline?
Commissioner, that's a little bit beyond me, but I'll be glad to take that back and discuss it with our Consumer Services Division.
that would be great, because there are a lot of folks out there that could use the help, particularly this winter. And so if you take that back with you, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I wanted to give you a chance to talk about ORS's recommendation for feasibility for the feasibility analysis for hedging for the electrical programs. What are ORS's, in ORS making that recommendation, what's your hope, what's your impetus?
Well, Commissioner, similar to the discussion that we had in the PGA hearing earlier this month, the Commission has expressed interest in seeing what the feasibility of a natural gas hedging program that has been addressed in previous fuel and PGA dockets. ORS recognizes that there could be an opportunity for value to the customers and to the company as well. ORS is requesting that the company not simply, but to look at the feasibility of establishing a program. This company is part of a larger Dominion fleet. There is a possibility that there are other sister companies to Dominion Energy South Carolina that may have a natural gas hedging program in place. ORS is requesting that the company evaluate the feasibility and what the benefits could be, and to provide that information back to ORS and to the Commission for review.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman-Wynn. How are you?
Well, Madam Chair.
I noticed in your summary that you used the exact verbiage that was in paragraph B4 of the stipulation.
I believe that's also the exact verbiage that's in my direct testimony.
Tell me about the ORS's statement of the company's forecasted costs are reasonable. Tell me how y'all reached that conclusion.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I think that we need to keep in mind that there was an original forecast that was provided in the company's direct testimony and an evaluation conducted on that. Coming out of that, ORS...
Excuse me, when you say evaluation, ORS conducted?
ORS conducted an evaluation of the forecast as part of the company's direct testimony.
Okay.
ORS also then requested that the company update that forecast due to timing. It's been some time since that original forecast came out. The company provided an update to that forecast as part of its rebuttal testimony. ORS conducted a similar review of the company's updated forecast as part of its review in the SIR rebuttal testimony, and provided the analysis and recommendations stemming from that updated evaluation in its SIR rebuttal testimony.
Okay. And so the methodologies were reasonable, standard industry practices, is that a fair statement?
I would say yes. I believe the company, ORS Witness Hyatt could speak a bit more to industry practices in a more national view, but the evaluation, the methodologies that Dominion has used are the same that they have consistently used and are similar to those that ORS has reviewed for the other electric IOUs in the state.
And the results were reasonable based on the inputs used at the time each of the forecasts were run. Would that be fair?
That is fair, yes, ma'am.
And so that led ORS to conclude that the forecast costs were reasonable.
Correct, yes.
Basically at the various times that they were run.
Yes, given the information at the time when with the correct timing, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Commissioners, any further questions for this witness? Hearing none. Mr. Huber, any redirect?
No redirect, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman-Wynn, thank you for your testimony. You may stand down.
Thank you.
ORS calls.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
ORS
ma'am.
calls Philip Hayett to the stand. And as Mr. Huber mentioned previously, he's testifying virtually.
Correct. Do we have Mr. Hayat virtually?
Yes, I am here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hayat. I'm going to ask you to state your name for me, please.
My name is Philip Hayat.
And would you raise your right hand and let me administer the oath? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Hayat. Ms. Given?
Mr. Hay, are you able to hear me all right?
I am.
Good. Thank you. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Philip Hayat.
Mr. Hayat, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by J. Kennedy and Associates, and I'm a vice president.
Thank you. Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 15 pages of surrebuttal testimony which were pre-filed in this docket on November 21st, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony?
No, I have none.
And if I asked you those same questions today as those posed in your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Madam Chair, at this time I would ask that the pre-filed surrebuttal testimony of Philip Hayat be entered into the record of this case as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Hayat's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hayat, did your pre-filed surrebuttal testimony also include 2 exhibits marked as PH1 and PH2?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your exhibits?
I do not.
Thank you. Madam Chair, at this time I would ask that exhibits PH1 and PH2 be entered into the record of this case as a composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Hayat's pre-filed surrebuttal exhibits marked PH1 and PH2 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 8 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hayat, did you prepare a summary of your surrebuttal testimony?
I did.
Would you please present your summary to the Commission?
Yes, thank you. And good afternoon, Commissioner Belzer and Commissioners. My surrebuttal testimony addressed 4 issues. The reasonableness of ORS's review of the company's request for a mid-period base fuel component adjustment, the opportunity for mitigation measures that could reduce the fuel cost increase to customers, Plexos benchmarking tasks that the company stated previously it would perform, and whether the company's significant under-collected fuel balance was unique to DES compared to other utilities that I'm familiar with. Regarding ORS's review of DES's request for a mid-period base fuel component adjustment, I found it reasonable that ORS did not perform a comprehensive examination of the company's historic generation fuel costs as part of this proceeding. ORS primarily reviewed the company's projected fuel costs between January 1 and April 30th, 2023, and reserved the right to perform a comprehensive review and request an adjustment, if appropriate, of the company's prior period fuel costs during the 2023 fuel proceeding. As part of my review, I discussed with ORS the modeling data it analyzed. I also reviewed information ORS evaluated in reaching its conclusion that the company should include more current fuel prices in the Plexos modeling analysis. The second issue I considered was whether there were any mitigation measures that could potentially reduce the fuel cost increases to customers. I found that Mr. Seaman-Wynn's recommendation to use more current fuel prices in the Plexos modeling was appropriate, would lead to a lower base fuel component than the company proposed, and would still allow the company to significantly reduce the projected under-recovered fuel balance by April 2023 as it desired. By setting the base fuel component to 3.806 cents per kilowatt hour instead of 4.877 cents per kilowatt hour as the company proposed, the company could still limit its projected under-collected fuel balance to rise to no more than $404 million by April 2023, the goal set by the company in its pre-filed direct testimony. The third issue I addressed relates to the Plexos production cost model that the company used to project fuel costs. Since DES first began using Plexos in 2021, ORS has recommended that a benchmark be performed. During the course of this proceeding, the company has confirmed that it intends to complete and provide the benchmark by February of 2023. The last issue I addressed was a comparison of DES under-recovered fuel balance to the fuel balance other utilities I am familiar with currently have to determine whether DES situation is unique. From my investigation, it was evident that all of these other utilities had significant under-collected fuel balances just like DES, and some sought and were granted mid-period adjustments similar to DES requests. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Hayett. Madam Chair, at this time, Mr. Hayett is available for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbon. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Hayett? Hearing none, I suppose there's no redirect.
No redirect, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hayett, thank you for your appearance today and your testimony. You may be excused.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I was about to ask if Mr. Hayett could be excused, but it sounds like you've heard that. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Connell informs he's 20 minutes away. I thought he was in Florence, about 45. I thought he'd be here. Should we take a brief break?
Yes, let's take a break. We'll say 20 minutes, but if y'all will let us know when he arrives, we'll reconvene. Thank you. Thank you, sir. We're on recess till 1:25 or a little later, depending. Or earlier. No, it'll be later. Have to be a little later. We'll do 20 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We are in the continuation of the hearing in docket number 2022-259-E, the application of Dominion Energy for mid-period adjustment to increase base rates for the recovery of electric fuel costs. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. Present in the hearing room, we have Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. Mr. Elliott. Can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
The South Carolina Energy Users Committee would call Kevin O'Donnell to the stand.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell, state your name for me, please.
Kevin W. O'Donnell.
You're okay. And raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir. And if you turn that microphone on, that would be a great help. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell, would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Kevin O'Donnell, capital O, apostrophe capital Donnell.
And Mr. O'Donnell, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm president of Nova Energy Consultants in Cary, North Carolina.
And what are your duties and responsibilities with Nova Energy Consultants?
We do wholesale power projects. We also do retail rate litigation, expert witness assistance.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell, did you cause to be prepared and pre-filed with this commission 7 pages of direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Have you had an opportunity to review your testimony here this afternoon?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any corrections or revisions to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you those same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. O'Donnell into the record as if given orally.
Mr. O'Donnell's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Donnell, appended to your pre-filed direct testimony was your appendix, your resume. Do you have any changes to your resume?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, would move Appendix A to Mr. O'Donnell's pre-filed direct testimony into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Are you doing his exhibits? Isn't there also an exhibit attached to that?
Yes, I'll do
do
a
that.
composite, the appendix, and then the.
Well, let's just do a composite if
All
that's
right,
okay.
and to that end, Mr. O'Donnell, did you prepare one exhibit to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or revisions to that exhibit?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, we've moved the appendix and the exhibit into the record as a composite hearing exhibit.
Appendix A and Exhibit KW01 attached to Mr. O'Donnell's pre-filed direct testimony will be marked for identification as a composite exhibit number 9 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. O'Donnell, did you cause to be prepared and pre-filed with this commission 5 pages of surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Have you had an opportunity to review your surrebuttal testimony?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any corrections or revisions to your surrebuttal testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you those same questions again this afternoon, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, would move the surrebuttal testimony into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. O'Donnell's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. O'Donnell, do you have a summary?
Yes, I do.
Would you please present it?
Yes. My name is Kevin W. O'Donnell, and I am appearing in this case on behalf of the South Carolina Energy Users Committee, SCEOC, that represents large manufacturers throughout South Carolina. On October 28, 2022, counsel for SCEOC filed my testimony in this case, in which I outlined my position in regards to the company's application in this case. On November 21, 2022, SCEOC filed my surrebuttal testimony. I support the settlement between the Office of Regulatory Staff, SCEOC, and Dominion Energy South Carolina. I believe the settlement is in the best interest of all parties in this case. This completes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Please answer any questions the commission might have.
Commissioners, questions for this witness? Commissioner?
Sure.
Commissioner Caston?
I don't know that it's a question so much, but good afternoon, Mr. O'Donnell.
Good afternoon.
Looking through your testimony, we talked about spreading this out over a 3-year period. I guess it, kind of brought to mind, you may or may not know this, but you do understand, by law, certainly the company can voluntarily do something like that, but by law, the commission's kind of constrained to make any fuel adjustments within 12 months. Do you know that or understand that?
Yes, I believe Counsel for Skiok and I did discuss that matter. However, it has been done in the past here in South Carolina.
Well, again, I think there's nothing to prohibit the company from doing that, but we can't mandate it. But you seem to understand all that. But I just kind of wanted to throw that out there, I guess, just for clarification, just to let you or anyone else that may want to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. O'Donnell? Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. O'Donnell, there's been some discussion by another witness about the idea of cost sharing. I might not have the term right, but the idea that there be a split between what the customer is responsible for and what the utility might be responsible for. Is that something you've observed in your career?
No. It would be interesting, and I would be very, I'll be very interested in seeing how that would operate, how the company would operate. I mean, for example, if there was a 50-50 split, how would they handle the 50% of their cost exposure? My guess is they would hedge a lot. But at the same time, what happens if there's, or when there is a rate decrease? Do they get to keep that 50% as well? I guess I'm in a little bit different position than a lot of people because I represent a number of municipal and university power systems. And this past year has been incredibly difficult for everybody, including me, because you haven't quite lived until you get up in front of about 100 people who are very upset about their power bill. But in those particular circumstances, you can't do anything but raise the rates because otherwise, in my case, the municipality was going to declare bankruptcy. So I have not seen anything quite like what you're referring to. I don't know how it would work. I would have to see how it would work out. Utilities are risk averse, so if something like that were to occur, it would really surprise me.
Thank you. I appreciate your answering that on the fly.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. O'Donnell. Thank you for your appearance here today. You stated in your summary that you and on behalf of South Carolina Energy Users Committee supports the settlement agreement. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in your testimony, you'd indicated that the mid-year adjustment as originally proposed, I think you used the term budget buster,
Yes.
something along those lines. Is it your position that the stipulation mitigates the increase to an extent that the Energy Users Committee is something that they can assume or weather, I should say?
We could live with it.
Okay.
It's not ideal, but I mean, inflation is going up across the board everywhere. I mean, energy commodities is worse than other areas that I've seen. The good news is, and I think that's part of the reason for what the IRS did in this case, is you look out in the gas forward markets. We're seeing gas prices come down. When I was last here, we were looking at, 2 months ago, we were looking at forward prices in January and February here in Zone 5 of $20 an MMBTU. It's now about $14 an MMBTU. It's coming down, but we still have a ways to go. So SCIA can handle it. It's not ideal, but we do recognize that we're in unsettling times. The problems we have here in the Carolinas is a lot more than just the commodity cost of natural gas. We have a pipeline that's highly constrained. And I noticed that there was talk about this in the settlement agreement. We need more pipelines badly in the Carolinas, both north and south. We need to get some of that Marcellus and Appalachian gas flowing from north to south because our growth is going to depend on it. And right now we're hurting for capacity.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Commissioners, any further questions for this witness? Hearing none. Mr. Elliott, any redirect?
No redirect to this witness, and since he's the last witness, I would request that he be excused.
Mr. O'Donnell, you may be excused. Thank you for appearing here today.
Thank you.
Anything else from the parties? I believe there was an email sent to party council short time ago about proposed orders. Is that correct? December 15th, does that sound correct?
Chair Belzer, I've not seen that email yet, but
Yeah, it was sent a couple of weeks ago. It's on the DMX, actually. It's on the DMS, actually, so I hope, but I will note that there have not been any replies that have been put on the DMS, so that was why I was bringing the data.
Well, I will curate my inbox and try to find that email and respond to it. But
Tell you
December 15th sounds fine to
if not, look on the DMS. Or earlier. That's, if you want to get it in earlier, that helps too. And if there are any objections or anything, please copy all parties and correspond with Ms. Clausen if you would. But otherwise, we'll look for them on that date. Parties, I'd like to thank you, as always, for y'all's professionalism and working through some difficult issues, and appreciate all y'all put forth today. And if there's nothing further to come before the commission today, last chance, we'll adjourn this hearing. Thank you very much.